Welcome to the Fishbowl. I'm Jade, and first and foremost, thank you for giving me your time because time is one thing people can never get back. And the fact that you chose to spend a piece of yours here with me tonight truly means something. So before we begin, go ahead and put on your scuba gear because here at the Fishbowl, we do not stay on the surface. We dive deep into the conversations people whisper about privately, but rarely unpack honestly. And tonight's conversation is called Now That You Have Them, What Now? And yes, some of y'all probably already know exactly where the inspiration came from. The song, If You Mess With Me, I'll Take Your Man. The beat was catchy, the confidence was loud, and the song became memorable. But beneath the entertainment, there was actually a deeper conversation hiding inside of it. Because tonight we are talking about desire, ego, validation, forbidden fruit, trust, competition, emotional security, and what really happens psychologically once someone finally gets the person they were chasing. Because sometimes people do not genuinely want someone because they deeply love them. Sometimes they want them because somebody else has them. Because socially, human beings are often drawn toward what appears valuable, desired, unavailable, or emotionally competitive, and psychologically. Some people confuse winning someone with actually building something healthy with them because there is a difference between attraction, conquest, validation, and emotional compatibility. And if we are honest tonight, some people become emotionally attached to the thrill of being chosen over somebody else. The ego boost, the attention, the excitement, the validation of feeling powerful enough to disrupt another relationship. Because sometimes it is not even about the person, it is about what the situation represents emotionally and socially. This behavior has been normalized for years through music, reality television, movies, social media, and relationship culture. People joke about stealing somebody's man or taking somebody's woman, like relationships are trophies to win instead of emotional commitments requiring trust, stability, honesty, and emotional safety. But tonight, I want to ask the deeper question, now that you have them, what now? Because eventually the chase slows down, the competition ends, the excitement settles, and reality finally enters the room. And now you are sitting beside a person who was willing to emotionally cross lines to be with you. And psychologically, trust becomes complicated almost immediately because somewhere deep down, even if nobody says it out loud, the thought quietly exists. If they could do this with me, could they eventually do this to me? Because foundations matter, and many people underestimate how much emotional stability matters in relationships. Because trust is not just about attraction, it is about emotional safety, consistency, predictability, and integrity. And when relationships begin through overlap, betrayal, secrecy, emotional cheating, or deception, many couples spend the rest of the relationship trying to silence fears that never fully disappear because now every late night phone call feels suspicious. Every new friendship feels questionable. Every social media interaction feels triggering because somewhere psychologically, people remember how the relationship started. And sometimes the relationship itself becomes emotionally exhausting because insecurity built the foundation instead of peace. And one of the deepest questions people rarely ask themselves is this: can you ever fully relax emotionally in a relationship that began with instability? Because emotionally safe relationships usually allow people to breathe, to trust, to rest mentally, but relationships born from competition often create emotional hypervigilance. People become watchful, anxious, controlling, suspicious, emotionally reactive, because nervous systems respond differently when trust feels uncertain. And socially, people often say, if he was that easy to take, he was never yours anyway. And honestly, there is truth hidden inside of that statement because emotionally mature people create boundaries naturally. People who genuinely value commitment do not become emotionally available every time attention appears. And maybe that is why some people eventually realize that losing someone was not really a loss at all. Maybe it was exposure, exposure of weak commitment, emotional immaturity, lack of integrity, or emotional inconsistency. And this conversation is not about blaming only the other woman or the other man either, because the person inside the relationship also made choices, and accountability matters on every side. Because sometimes people focus so heavily on the outsider that they ignore the reality that somebody inside the relationship opened the emotional door in the first place. And to be fair, sometimes relationships were already struggling before another person appeared, because not every relationship that ends was healthy behind closed doors. Sometimes there was already emotional distance, neglect, loneliness, disconnection, resentment, lack of intimacy, or unhappiness that nobody else could see publicly. And that matters too, because emotionally disconnected people often become vulnerable to outside attention. And sometimes what looks like stealing from the outside was actually a relationship already quietly collapsing internally. But even then, the deeper psychological question still remains. What exactly are people searching for emotionally when they chase unavailable people? Because sometimes people are not really chasing love, they are chasing validation. Some people do not feel valuable unless they are chosen over somebody else, unless they win, unless they feel desired enough to compete for emotionally. Because for some individuals, attention temporarily fills emotional voids connected to insecurity, abandonment, rejection, or self worth wounds. And for others, the thrill is actually in the chase itself, because some people are addicted to pursuit, addicted to the excitement of emotionally unavailable situations, addicted to the adrenaline of competition. And once they finally get the person, the excitement fades because the relationship was never truly about intimacy. It was about conquest. And psychologically, people who constantly need emotional excitement sometimes struggle with peaceful love because stability feels unfamiliar to them. And socially, modern relationship culture has made this even more complicated because today, some people are not only chasing relationships, they are chasing appearances, social media validation, couple aesthetics, attention, status, and public envy. Because society has created environments where people sometimes desire the image of being chosen more than the actual responsibility of maintaining healthy love. And there are people who want the picture, the attention, the title, the public victory, without fully understanding the emotional work required to sustain trust privately. And maybe that is why some relationships look beautiful online while quietly falling apart emotionally behind closed doors. Because possessing someone is not the same thing as building emotional safety with them. And being chosen publicly does not automatically mean somebody values you deeply. Because attention can be temporary, ego can be temporary, attraction can be temporary, but trust, honesty, emotional consistency, and peace are the things that sustain relationships long after excitement fades. And honestly, there is another side to this conversation that people do not talk about enough. And it is the moment when somebody becomes emotionally exhausted, mentally drained, spiritually disturbed, and completely fed up from carrying the weight of a toxic relationship. Because sometimes people are not losing somebody, they are finally releasing a burden. And this is a true story for me. And I am not saying this to flex. I am saying this because some women and men have gone through so much emotionally with a person, so much chaos, stress, disrespect, confusion, dishonesty, and mental exhaustion. that eventually they reach a point where they no longer want to compete, no longer want to argue, no longer want to hold on, because peace becomes more valuable than possession. And I remember in my younger years being so mentally disturbed and emotionally exhausted by a relationship, so tired of the confusion, the stress, and the emotional instability that I literally told him, call her to come get you. And she came, okay? Because at that point, it was no longer about winning him, it was about reclaiming my peace. And I think some people need to hear that tonight. Sometimes letting somebody have him or her is not weakness, it is emotional survival, because there comes a point where the relationship itself starts costing too much mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. And when somebody constantly disturbs your nervous system, your sleep, your peace, your confidence, your emotional stability, eventually you stop asking, how do I keep them? And start asking, why am I fighting this hard to hold on to something that is destroying me? Because emotionally mature people eventually realize that peace matters more than possession. And maybe that is why some people finally reach a place where they can genuinely say, you can have him, you can have her, not because they do not care anymore, but because they finally care about themselves too. And maybe tonight's real lesson is this: being chosen is not the same thing as being valued, and possessing someone is not the same thing as building trust with them. Because eventually the chase ends, the ego quiets down, the excitement fades, and all that remains is the truth of the connection itself. And the real question becomes, can trust survive how this relationship began? This has been The Fishbowl with Jade. Thank you for diving deep with me tonight. And remember, stay classy, stay curious, and stay ever evolving. Everywhere podcasts can be listened to now. The Fishbowl with Jade is streamed on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube, Good Pods, Audible, and iHeart.